Okay, we're live. All right. Hey, everybody out there. Glad you're with us today. Otisa and I are going to have a really good conversation. So I'm super excited about it. And I know that you will be too. You're going to get a lot of great information today. And so we'll go ahead and get started. Um, I am thrilled to welcome today Otisa Eads. And we are about to have a really great conversation about founder syndrome and team dynamics. Two of my favorite topics, by the way, Otisa.
Me too.
So welcome to the Nonprofit Coffee Talk, Otisa.
Thank you so much for having me, Libby. It's been just exciting leading up to this moment. So I'm just so happy to be here.
Well, I am grateful that you are, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So, by way of introduction, I'm Libby V, nonprofit champion and founder of Libby V and Associates. And through visioning and strategy work, leadership coaching, development support, and organizational and board development, our nonprofit leader clients successfully raise more money and have more impact. But not all nonprofits can afford to hire a consultant, so I created the Nonprofit Coffee Talk as one way to provide great content and helpful information to as many nonprofit people as possible. And so I hope you find it useful. I know the conversation today is going to be helpful to you. So, buckle up. We're getting ready to go and dig in a little bit. I would like to read Otisa's bio because it's fascinating. And Tissa, I apologize to you because I was reading somebody else's bio when I mentioned the cosplay and the MMA and the Star Trek. Okay, so there are only two people I know. You're my apologies. My screen had gone up to the previous guest.
It's okay. I was like, I like those things.
That's how this morning has gone, right? Like technology issues. Otissa and I didn't even know if we were going to be able to hear each other. So we're here, but we probably should take a deep breath. I need to take a deep breath. Okay. So anyway, so Otissa thrives on helping established business owners, nonprofit founders, CEOs create efficient systems that drive success. Listen, folks, systems are critical. If you're going to scale, grow, whatever, you need systems in place. I say that all the time. Systems and processes are so important. She finds immense joy in collaborating with startups, nonprofits, and business owners seeking innovative solutions to their challenges. So she specializes in crafting impactful strategies, implementing onboarding systems, and facilitating transformative experiences such as team mediation retreats and workshops. I want to talk to you because I want to do a retreat. And we both talked about meditation before and how we each have personal meditation practices that are life changing and set our days up for a little bit more calm, a little bit more focus. So anyway, as a Black woman working in human resources and people operations, Otissa has witnessed and navigated the challenges posed by oppressive systems, both within and outside the workplace. And over the past 5 years, she really made it her mission to reshape workplaces. I love that as a gigantic vision of the future. Fostering inclusivity, self-care, staff advocacy, and collaborative environments through a holistic leadership approach. Otissa is driven by a commitment to justice, and she uses her business platform to shed light on injustices. Also love it. And so she does some impactful training sessions, engaging speaking and all kinds of dialogue and positive change around justice. So wonderful. I love all that. Lives in Colorado, originally from Kentucky. And so I'm thrilled to have Otissa here today for this riveting conversation. And we're going to get going with that now. So, Otissa, nonprofits you said this and I couldn't agree with you more. So I'm just going to read your statement. Nonprofits tend to spend a lot of time and energy hiring people, right?
Mhm.
And hiring based on kind of aligning with their mission, vision, and values, right? And there's so much discussion about values and
Yes.
right. But sometimes they don't pay attention, and you raise this, and it's so astute. They don't raise this notion of newness and changing the team. Like when you add a new team member, it changes the team dynamic. So expanding teams it just shifts the whole dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a lot of experience in that field and with nonprofits. And so I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that to get us started, and talk about what needs to be in place for the work environment and all those things so that a team can thrive and be their best, right? Best selves individually and best teams. And start with that, and then we'll get to the founder syndrome conversation.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long-winded dialogue. I'm done. I'm done now. So I apologize for that.
Please do not apologize at all. Yeah, I think when it comes to team dynamics, a lot of the times when folks are focusing on hiring, they either want someone who's going to blend right into their team, or just you hear the word culture fit a lot, and I usually challenge that with the word alignment. And not just alignment with mission, vision, values, but how the organization operates, the goals that they're trying to achieve, the gaps that are there. Are they going to help fill those gaps? Or are they just going to continue doing the same thing over and over again, right? So I always talk about how are they aligning with the organization in those ways. And then when it comes to looking at the team as a whole, I think it's important to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. All of those things are important. I do trainings on those and retreats. However, diversity can look like a lot of different things. And so I always tell folks, like, what are the things that are missing in your team? Do you have a lot of people who have this similar kind of personality or similar way of showing up in the workplace? Do you need someone else that's going to, when I say shake things up in a good way, right? Because what I've learned is some folks, when they're hiring, whether it's a hiring committee of board and staff or it's the executive director, they tend to find folks that are similar to everyone else on staff, which how is
Right,
that diverse?
right.
And so I tell them differences are assets.
Yes.
And so you have to be hiring in that kind of mindset of, okay, we need some folks that are a little bit more driven and out there and wanting to let's say it's donor relations. Like, you need someone who's ready to get out there and be a little bit more assertive, and you know what I mean. So it's like, why are you hiring someone who doesn't like to get on calls or doesn't really want to talk to new people, but they fit the the standard culture that you have already, and so it requires kind of sitting down and looking at the team that you have and figuring out what is needed for you all to be successful or to take it to the next level in your hiring efforts. So I look about I look at it as like, look at your team, kind of do a little inventory, or kind of like a little audit. Don't go ham, but like kind of take inventory of what you currently have and be thinking of, okay, so if I'm hiring these positions, what is kind of needed? What are the gaps that we currently have? What are some things that we've kind of overlooked because we've been just kind of hiring the same old folks, which is, again, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you really want to have transformation, or if you really wanting to change things within the org, then you're going to have to bring folks that bring different gifts and skills to the team. So
I love that
yeah.
so much. So I'm just gonna say something, and then we'll go
Yeah.
from there. We do that, right? Like, when I say we, it's sort of like inherent in the culture and the business and all that stuff, which is thinking that we're doing the right thing by, like, we have to find somebody that fits. And then we also, when we talk about diversity, we always think of color,
Yep. Yep.
race,
Mhm.
right? And diversity of thought and perspective and experience and all those things, are not as tangible as looking at somebody and being like, oh, look, our team has different races
Yep.
represented, right? And but it's so important, because you just, if you it's sort of that notion of, you keep doing the same things, you're going to get the same result. If you keep
Mhm.
hiring the same people, you're going to have the same
Yep.
results. So anyway, I love what you just said, and we could talk about that forever. But do you have sort of some, tactical kind of things, or things that people should think about? Not that this is all tactical, but what people, how do you go about this? What would you suggest a team leader or a CEO do
Yeah.
to think this through? How would they implement?
Yeah, I think starting with that kind of like mini inventory of kind of what's happening with your staff. Again, this could also relate to board. Kind of just seeing, what is needed, what's missing, and then after you kind of take stock. I'm someone pen to paper, but you can type this out if you want. Then making sure that do you have the environment, the workplace culture to welcome difference of
Yes.
thought or any type of diversity, right? Same thing when folks are wanting to have more diverse candidates, whether that's based on race, sexual orientation, accessibility, right? Or neurodiversity, right? Do you
Yes.
have the work environment for them to be able to thrive and be successful in their roles? Are you able to handle someone that might challenge something that you're already doing? Are you going to welcome them when they're saying, hey, I actually see a whole different way of doing this. Do you mind if I share that with you? Are you going to be resistant to that? Or are you going to say, yes, let's set up a meeting to talk about it? So that's something that I think folks don't tend to do. They tend to focus on, we need diversity, and then they hire, and then the person doesn't last very long, or retention is high because or low because they're not thinking about the work culture or the environment for those folks to thrive. They're just focusing on just having diverse candidates, not thinking, well, and that's where inclusion comes in, right? And equity comes in, is what's the environment, what's the workplace culture for these folks to bring their best self forward and to be successful. So those are the questions you kind of have to ask yourself: is this organization ready for these things? And if not, what do we need to do to get to that place where we can bring in folks that have different perspectives and that can bring those assets to the workplace, right? Like, what does this org need to do, or this company need to do to get there, right?
Yes, that is probably the most important part of all this is you might be able to attract people
Mm-hmm.
in, but what do you need to do to support them once they're there?
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk a little bit about that? What questions should they ask themselves? What things should they talk about,
Yeah.
think through, put in place, eliminate, whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely look at kind of, you know, if they're ready to, bring in those candidates and have that kind of those recruitment efforts. I think before posting and before hiring, kind of look at the organization and say, okay, well, we care about DEIJ, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and we want to have diversity. We want to have all these things, but are we living those things out in our organization? Are we actually putting that to practice? What does that mean? Does that mean looking at our systems, looking at our organization in a little bit deeper, lens? How do we handle complaints? How do we handle performance evaluations? How do we handle all these different things? Look at the systems that you have in place. Are they equitable? Can staff, if staff have a problem with leadership, what do they do? Do they just sit in discomfort? Can they go to a board member? Are they allowed to go to board meetings? There's a lot of different things to kind of think about. Not just, oh yay, we have diverse staff.
Right.
What to do when things aren't going well. And then also, for me, onboarding is extremely important because I think that in this time, I think onboarding can set up a candidate or set up a new hire for success, but it also helps them get to know, like I said, workplace culture, systems, hierarchy, if you have, a
Yeah.
specific system with how things get approved and so forth and so on. And what are the cultural norms? So onboarding is extremely important. The first 90 days are really crucial, let alone 6 months to a year. So what does that process look like for them? Are you transparent with your policies? Do you have a procedures manual for them to refer back to? Who's holding the person that's executing onboarding accountable for making sure that process, at least, and when I say seamless, I don't mean perfect. I mean, it's clear with how they're going through the process, right? From beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
And then also, who's holding leadership accountable for, like I said, living out either, like I said, their values, living out their commitments. Are they practicing what they preach from the community and internal, right? A lot
Yes.
of my clients, I adore them. They do a great job of, living out their mission out in the world, out in the community, but sometimes they forget to look at what's happening internally,
Yes. Yes.
right?
That's common, I think, right?
Yes.
Very common. Yeah.
Yes. But how are they for me? So it's like if you notice that, what are you going to do about it? And I know all of this sounds kind of overwhelming, like wow, this is a lot to think about. Um, and you're not going to get it all solved in a day, let alone a retreat, right? But for me, it's more about how are you having these conversations with your leadership team, with your staff. You'll be surprised the things that staff can share with you to make these adjustments and improvements. I
Right.
always tell my clients, your staff, they have more knowledge and expertise on how to make those changes than you could probably imagine because
Yeah.
they're living it day to day. And they have different ideas. And guess what? You hired them at one time, so they understand onboarding and what can be improved.
Mhm.
And so you'll be surprised what you can learn from them to make these sort of changes or to have these kind of conversations and discussions.
Yeah, and I think your point is really important that this isn't like, well, we're done now. We did all that DEI, JBE, whatever you put at the end, A, whatever it is, right? I like justice at the end. That's my favorite. But there's never a done. There's never
Yeah.
a done. It's constantly, constantly changing everything. And it, even this is just, I would love your thoughts on this, but it, to what I've thought about is that even just asking like, what do you need to be supported by us? Like, what do you need? Even in the interview process, and like, okay, it's a two-way interview, right? It's like when you come into an organization, how do you like to work? How do you like to be supported? How do you like to be in a team? How do you like to, interact? What do you need? Is that for real? Like, am I completely off base, or is that some?
No, I think these are great questions. I also think though, and I just spoke to a group of folks that are in the job search world. So if I'm a little ranty, that's why.
No,
But I
thank
think, yeah, well, I think we forget that, folks are going to be their best selves in interviews, and they may not always share what they really need or their support, or let's say they have accessibility things. I encourage folks to share that. But in
yeah,
reality, we all know that an interview is also where folks are judging if you're going to work with them or not, right? So
yeah,
it's a little, um, yes, you can ask these questions, but be mindful that they may not share everything with you.
true.
This is kind of like,
It's a
I
little
joke.
expensive, right? In an interview.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't. I think it can feel like that for the candidate, even though that's not what's happening. But it's more of like they think that every question is a right or wrong answer, even though
right.
that's not true.
Yeah,
So
great
I,
point.
it's just to me, it's you can ask that. They may give you like, oh, I just need clear instructions and structure, and that is probably true. But
Yeah,
maybe as you start working with them, that might shift and change because support is a very vague thing
it is.
and it changes from day to day. So
Yes.
I think what would be helpful is in an interview process saying, we really want to set up our employees for success.
Yeah,
And we really care about that. What does that mean to you? What does success look like for you in this role, in this position?
yeah.
Right? That's a better question.
Mm,
And then when they get hired during their one on ones, then you can ask questions like, how can I best support you? Does having one on ones biweekly work? Do
yeah,
you like having, I don't know, like a certain email, like I don't know, I'm making things up.
yeah,
But
yeah,
that's to me like how can you ask that in a way that's not going to throw them off or make them feel like they're going to give you like a right or wrong answer. And then when they're hired, then you can really get to the meat of what you're trying to ask them and say like we really just want to figure out how we can make this experience as you're getting to know our company, and from now on, a pleasant one. We care about your success, so how
mhm.
can we support you, right?
Yeah,
um,
that's really great. Thank you for that level setting, 'cause, you're right. I mean, they're gonna tell you what you wanna hear to get the
mhm.
job. I mean, that's
I
what we
know.
do. It's human nature, right? Um, and so how do you ask that when they are being onboarded, I would think, or right after that process and the orientation or whatever, and that's something that needs to keep
Yep.
continuing to happen, right?
Yep.
Like, what, what do you need now? What do you need? What's changed? What's good? What's not working for you? And how do you establish that trust so somebody will tell you,
Exactly. And I like that, as because I'm glad you said the ongoing. Like, to me, this is an ongoing process.
right?
And that's why it's important to kind of set that expectation. I feel like I feel like, I'm sorry, I can go on a little rant about interviews. But I think a lot of folks, they look at the interview as a one and done
Yeah.
thing, right? And I always tell folks, when they are asking me questions about job searching and interviewing, I tell them, like, um, the interview doesn't stop. Like, so you can look at it like it's a one and done thing. For me, if I'm showing up to the interview, I want to make sure that the person you get after the interview is the same. So we're
Yes.
still getting to know, but it's for both parties. Both parties are still getting to know one another.
Yeah.
They're still figuring things out. And so it doesn't really stop, but we tend to think that the employer really thinks that. Like, the
Yeah.
employer thinks once the offer letter is signed, we're done. But no, you're not. So are
Right.
you living out the things that, is the organization, is the employer living out the things
Yep.
that they said in those interviews, right? It wasn't just lip service. So I always remind folks, like, the interview process is just the very beginning of this relationship,
Mhm.
that's going to evolve over time. And for me, it's both parties making sure that what was established in the interview process is only just growing and building upon from there. It's not just like getting you in and then getting catfished, right?
Right.
Or a horrible joke, but like, like, we don't want that experience for either
Yeah.
party. We want this to be a relationship that grows and continues and evolves,
Mhm.
hopefully in a positive direction. Sometimes not, but that's how I try to look at all of this. Is it's not a one and done, stop
Right.
start kind of thing.
Yeah, it is a relationship. And
Hmm.
but I think often employers and I don't mean like individuals necessarily only, but employers in general think of it as they're my employee as a one-sided
Yep.
relationship, and they aren't invested in, continuing to make the relationship work. Things change for the employee, things change at the employer, and it's like any relationship. If it's going to work, you got to keep talking about what's working, what's not, what do we need to do. Open lines of communication, trust is established, and yeah, that's critical. So two-way relationship, right? Should be.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry for the lecturing. All
Okay.
right. So should we talk a little bit about founder syndrome? Because that is such a thing I think it's exceptionally a high rate among um, nonprofit folks. So,
Yes. Yes. What's interesting is I've gotten to see founder syndrome both with like CEOs of companies and small business owners. Um, and it's interesting how nonprofits, I don't think it's easier to like acknowledge or diagnose in themselves,
right.
because there's this kind of, which I'm sure you can correct me, this kind of idea of legacy and history, and like, we've always done this, and which I'm not saying is bad, but I'm saying that it can also be a hindrance
Mhm.
if you're wanting this organization to grow over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
How things were done in the 1970s and
Yeah.
how things are being done in 2023 and beyond are very different.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that, wait a minute, we have the same perspective on hiring, or the same perspective on employee and board relations. If
Yeah.
we want growth, then we must change and evolve. That doesn't mean we go back and we edit our about and our our mission. Like, no, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the way you're showing up and living things out
Right.
might need to change.
Yeah.
And if you want growth, right, we both know that change is kind of inevitable, and if you don't change, then things kind of fall off. So but yeah, founder syndrome is fascinating, and
It
I
is.
think especially if the ED or the CEO, you know um created this nonprofit, and they were there at the very beginning, and planted the seeds, and now here we are, let's say 5 years later, and they're still like, I can't have help, and I don't have an assistant, and like, like, and I must do this and I must do that. or no, I don't need help, right? Like that, to me, that's how it manifests out.
Mm-hmm.
And even though like I've seen some amazing CEOs and EDs where they're really awesome, but I watch the little bits and pieces of like, no, we can't do that. Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll just kind of say like, have you heard of founder syndrome? And they're like, what is that? And I usually like give them a definition, let them read about it. And I tell them, and even boards, I always like to tell them this, they suffer from founder syndrome as well, especially if they've been on
Yes.
the board for a very long time.
Yes.
It's hard to, and I would say it's just there's a slight more resistant to newness and
Mm-hmm.
change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's harder for them to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing to kind of, have, a meltdown about.
Yeah.
It's more of like reflection and awareness that this is happening,
Mm-hmm.
especially if someone has been on the board or in leadership for more than 5 years or 5 years and up. I think that's where the moment of, wait a minute, hold on, let's kind of see where we're at, or just kind of notice like, oh, I kind of shot that person down with this idea without really giving it some thought. Or,
Yeah.
you know, where do I see myself kind of growing with the org as it grows and changes?
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that they need to resign right away, but to kind of have, especially if the CEO or ED founded the org,
Yes.
I really think having an exit strategy is extremely important, even if it's informal, even if it's a conversation, because I
Right.
have seen that burnout happen,
Yes.
or just like I said, that general resistance to
Yeah.
shifting gears.
Yep.
And people the mission suffers, the community suffers that you're trying to support if those conversations aren't being had. So I'll stop here. But yeah, I can talk about this literally for hours.
Yeah, it really is a thing, Otissa, everything you said is I applaud you for saying it because it's a hard conversation to have. And I applaud anybody that has it with folks. Because it sometimes is the elephant and sitting in the middle of the living room, and we all kind of just tiptoe around it and pretend it doesn't exist. But it's really it can be detrimental to an organization and to the people that they're serving. As you said, often founders start nonprofits from a place of trauma that they've experienced. It's almost, I would say a majority of the time, would you agree that it is based on an experience they've had,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
good or bad, and a lot of times it's a trauma. Somebody died, or a child, or whatever it is, and so they a little bit have blinders on because they're so like they want to help. It's the right. I mean, they only have good intentions, right? They
Mhm.
want to help other people not experience what they've experienced, but it becomes a little bit of yeah,
Yeah.
just kind of like tunnel vision approach. And sometimes they take it personally if somebody suggests they do something different, because it's theirs. They live it, breathe it, eat it, and birthed
Mm.
it, you know.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think there's the other side where I see where they haven't taken a vacation in years. They're always on their phone. They're always at every single event, fundraising opportunity, every single meeting. It's like the opposite. It's like they stretch themselves so thin
Yeah.
that can also be detrimental as well to themselves, first and foremost. But again, how can you show up if you're stretching yourself so thin? And then kind of accepting support or delegating things, especially like there's certain buckets. I've just noticed that they're like, no, I must hold on to this, I can't have an assistant. I'm like, yes you can, yes you can.
Yes.
Let's figure out how you can delegate, because you cannot do it all. So I think that there's different ways of looking at it. Same thing for board members. You have those core board members who are doing everything, right? And not thinking about, we might need to recruit more board members so we can,
Right.
do more with more hands than trying to be everywhere all the time. So I feel
Yep.
like founder syndrome has like different, I would
Hmm.
say, archetypes,
Yes.
depending on like leadership, board, or even a founding staff member. Like, I'm sure we know those moments where that staff member has been there since day one.
Yes.
And what I have noticed is when they're done, when they're burnt out and when they leave, there's a huge gap to fill.
Right.
And because no one had that conversation of, hey, you've been here for almost a decade. First off, are you happy? Do you want to stay here? Do you want to create a new role? Or do you have a plan? Like, or, like, what does that look like? And then creating a system for them. Or if they're like, you know what, I think I'm going to retire, or I think I'm going to shift gears, let's start talking about a strategy for my exit and hiring. I'd love to help you with that, whatever it is. I think that, again, we tend to, especially nonprofit land, it's like, yes, someone's here and they've been here and yay, we can rely on them and it's great. But we don't think about, wait a minute, have we checked in with where they're at and how they're doing? They're doing great work, but let's have a moment of reflection and seeing, does this make sense? And even on the other side, I'm sorry, I can talk about this from different lenses.
Yes.
If you have a younger nonprofit, let's say 2-3 years, and people have been doing everything. So you have like your core leadership team where they have been literally doing every single part of every single job description. As they're trying to grow, they also will have little bits of founder syndrome too, because they've seen the chaos that where everything started and was birthed. And then as they start hiring, it's a little bit difficult to let some tasks go. Or maybe you had someone who was doing HR operations, finance, and grant management for some reason. They're doing all of these hats or wearing all of these hats. No one really sits down and says, is this sustainable? Do you
Right.
actually like wearing all of these hats? Which hat
Yes.
would you prefer to wear? No
Yeah.
one slows down and has a conversation of, okay, now we have some funding to hire. Now we have some funding to get some support. Before we do that, let's talk about the future of your role.
Right.
So we can be a little bit strategic with how we hire, right?
Yeah. That
So
is so helpful. That is a big takeaway for me is, and I'm sure everybody out there, it's like, it's not just the founder who has founder syndrome, right? It affects everybody involved in the organization, and you have to have those conversations, right? And be mindful of that. I think that's really critical. So any last thoughts? And then tell us, like, I shared your social media handles, but is there any place else you want to connect or anything you have going on you want to share with us?
yeah, yes, of course. Well,
Wonderful. Thank you.
yes.
It's been a great conversation. You
You
bring
are so welcome. I'm so happy that I was able to be here. I enjoy these conversations so much. I do have some things coming up. I'm actually going to be launching a HR Safe Space. It's going to be a group coaching cohort. We're doing a pilot for the first 6 months, and then we will be opening up to a larger group and
okay.
doing both 6 month and annual. But
Right.
right now, we are helping folks that are HR leaders, operations managers. So if you're at a nonprofit and you do HR things, this is also for you, where we build community, networking, and also we have myself, my business partner, Nancy, where we're going to actually help you work through those different problems and issues that are happening in your organization. So that's going to start in October. I hit the launch button next week for folks to register.
Nice.
Yay.
Can
And
you share
so,
that, once you get it in the post
yes,
with the on my social media channels with your coffee talk on it, because that I
yeah,
think people are going to love that. So, and feel
yes.
free to tag me and stuff, and I can share it too.
Yes, I would love to. I'm really, really excited. And the goal is, a little tidbit or spoiler is in the future, we're going to do a version for executive directors and CEOs of nonprofits as well.
Nice,
So,
nice.
yeah, that'll be fun for,
That
for,
sounds
for folks.
really good. That sounds really amazing.
Yay.
Yeah, good
Yes.
for you. That sounds great. All
Yes.
right. Anything else? Anything else
Yeah.
you want to put out there?
I do a lot of different workshops and speaking. I'm actually planning on doing a workshop in October with a buddy of mine. I believe we're going to talk about burnout and resilience. So if you want to just stay part of my community, if you want to sign up for a newsletter, I will be sharing all of the things that I have going on. And if you just want to connect with me, chat, or send me an email, feel free to do that as well. I love staying in contact with folks.
Great. Yeah, feel free to put your website in there on my social posts about this or whatever you want. Okay. want you to do that. So thank you so, so much for spending time with me. I appreciate it, and getting everything done, leading up to this, because, I had you do a few things, fill out questionnaire, things like that. So this was wonderful. I feel like, I would love to chat with you moving forward about
Mhm.
maybe how we could partner, or how I could refer people to you, utilize your services, those kinds of things. So this is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Libby.
All right. You all have a great week. And I hope to see you soon. I hope you're all well. I will do one um, shameless plug, that September 1st, we are doing a free workshop on major gifts. So I'm going to put the link to that out there. It's going to be amazing, and I think you'll learn a lot. And so it's free. So why not, right? Why not sign up? Everybody have a great day, week. See you soon. And thank you, Otisa.